Hi, this is Karen with Karen's Cards and More, and today I wanted to show you how you can take just using an embossing folder as your main focal point for the front of your card, how you can totally change that up just by adding a different technique. This card, I just embossed. I did white with the fresh freesia accent, and a bow, and stamped it at the bottom. A nice, clean, elegant look. Using that same Pretty in Flowers folder, I did a second one, but this time I added watercoloring to my embossed image. And it gives it a whole different look and dresses it up and just makes a really neat difference. So if you want just a more simple, clean looking card, you could do this, but then maybe you wanted a splash of color and you were just in that mood, and it kind of dresses it up a little bit. So it is a matter of preference, and changing the colors would change the outlook. And I'm going to show you how I did these. The first steps are the same because you run it through your embossing folder, and then you just add watercoloring to this. So let's get started and let me show you how to put these together. They're really quick. The longest part is when you do the watercoloring, but we're going to talk our way through that as well. So let's get started. As I mentioned, I'm going to be using the Pretty in Flowers embossing folder. And then I'm using basic white card base that's 8.5 by 5.5, scored in the middle at 4 1/4. Then I have a piece of the fresh freesia that is, let me think, 4 3/8 by 5 3/8. And then I'm using the shimmery white. Now, I know when you lay it like this, you can see a difference in the color between that and the basic, but when you put it together on the card, it doesn't really show a big difference in color, and I was okay with that, but I wanted the shimmery for the watercolor technique. So this piece is 4 by 5 1/4. So this one's 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. This is 4 by 5 1/4. So this is just a little bit, it's just a little bit bigger, so we have a narrow border. And then I'm also going to be using the fresh freesia ribbon. Okay, now for the thank you, I wanted a big sentiment at the bottom, and I'm going to show you how I embossed down to a point, but I didn't emboss the bottom because I wanted my greeting to go there. And for that, I'm using the Ornate Thanks stamp set. There's all kinds of thank yous. This is so grateful, and then you could add extra little things with it if you wanted, but I'm just using the large thank you today. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I did with my shimmery white piece, and I'm going to bring in my trimmer for this. I'm not going to trim, but I am going to use my trimmer. So what I did, I'm going to push these blades out of the way. I wanted an 1.5" border. So I just put this in my trimmer at 1.5 inches. Now you could do this with a ruler, but this is such an easy way to do it and know that it's straight because you got it in here. And I just took a pencil and I just ran down on that edge of my trimmer. Just like that. So that gave me a line that I knew was straight. Then what I did, and I'm going to bring in my embossing machine. So what I did, there are two ways you could do this. The side of the folder that has the Stampin' Up emblem, that's going to be the side that pops up. That's going to be the embossed. The back side is the debossed. So when I put this in my folder, I put the line on the side without the Stampin' Up logo. What that did is it embossed it to the other side, so I didn't have to worry about this pencil mark. I didn't have to go back and erase it. I didn't have to do anything with it. If you do it the other way, it just means you're going to have to erase the line. That's the only difference. But I found if I put it in this way, and that line is simply to help me line it up, I want the bottom part sticking out. I'm going to lay that down so I can show you. So I want the bottom part sticking out of the folder because it's only going to emboss the part that's in the folder. So I held it on that line. And of course, you want to make sure you've got it straight. So I've got it there on the line. And I'm going to bring in my embossing folder. And you need to go by whatever my embossing machine, whatever the manufacturer's instructions for embossing. This is a thicker embossing folder, so your machine should have instructions for how to make your sandwiches, so you just need to follow that. And I'm going to make sure this is in here even, just like that. And for mine, I have found that if I put a couple pieces of cardstock in here as a shim, it gives me a better impression. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to run this through. Okay. Now I can move this out of the way. We're done with that. We're done with this. And now we have this. So when I pull this out, this is the deboss side where the pencil mark is, but if I flip it over, there's my embossed side. Isn't that cool? So pretty. Now, if you want to do the first card that I mentioned, you can stop there. You're ready to stamp your greeting and put it on the card base. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to go ahead and do the watercoloring. Now, you do not have to be an artist for this. You do not. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to bring in a hard, I have like a watercolor board, an artist board that I do stuff like this just because it's hard. And I'm going to bring in just a couple of the acrylic blocks. On this one, I have a jar that I just keep water in. You can see I've got it labeled. I've got one that I keep alcohol. I've got one that I keep water. I like to do it this way rather than putting the water in the brush. You can see I have some water in there, but I run out too quick and then I got to run to the sink. And so I usually just put my water right on a block. So I'm just going to squeeze water on there. That way I can dip in there and I have my water. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the larger flowers in the pale papaya. I'm going to use soft succulent for the leaves. I'm going to do the little flowers in the polished pink, and then the white in between I'm going to do with the fresh freesia. Now I want to say this before I get started. It will look different when it's dry. So you may do it and love it, and then when it dries, you'll go, oh, I got some white spaces, or you can always go back and add to it. Just use more water, more ink, and you're ready to go. Now you could do this with re-inkers, or what I'm going to be using today, these are our Stampin' Right markers. These are not the Stampin' Blends. The Stampin' Blends are alcohol based. These are just like the ink. So you can use these to color right on a stamp and then stamp and get that color. Especially useful if you want to take a stamp and you want to do part of it one color, part of it another color. These are great for that because you can just color the portion of the stamp the color that you want. So I'm going to be using these today. And I'm going to start with the pale papaya. And there's a brush end and a more fine tip end. And we're going to use the brush end. And I'm just going to scribble some color on a wood clear block. And I'm putting down quite a bit of color because I'm going to use quite a bit of color. Okay? So I've just got a bunch of the pale papaya on there. I've got water on there. I'm just going to dip my brush in the water and then in the pale papaya, and I'm just swirling it around to get it liquidy. And then I'm just going to come in and color. And you don't have to be perfect. Remember, this is a watercolor look, right? And watercolor isn't perfect. So I'm just going to continue while I talk to go along here. And what I found, there's little spaces within the flower. I colored all of that, the pale papaya. I was careful around the outside edge where there was going to be something else, but on the inside, I was not careful. I just colored the whole thing, the pale papaya. So I just start at the I just go around the outside edge because I want color all the way to the edge, just like this. And then I'm not so careful with bringing it in because I know that all that's going to be the pale papaya. So I really don't care because I know that I want the inside. I don't want to have to come in this little area with the purple. So I'm just going along like that. And I'm just going to keep doing this while I'm talking. Just to show you. Okay. Now I'm going to speed this up while I do the rest of the pale papaya, and you might see me have to add more ink or more water, and that's okay. You can do that as you need to. The more water you put with the color, the lighter the color will be. So I am going to go ahead and do all the pale papaya parts, and I will speed the video up through this, and then I'll come back for the next color. Okay, now before we leave the pale papaya, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this small tip end, and right in the middle of the flower, there's these little, they kind of look like little seeds. And I'm just going to color on the top of that raised part with this finer tip. And I'm just kind of scribbling on top of that. It just naturally stays on top of that raised part. And then I'm just going to dip in some water. And I'm just going to go over that to soften it. And that kind of spreads that intense color, but it gives the middle of the flower a more intense look. And I like that because I think that the center looks better that way. You totally do not have to do this step if you don't like that look. You could definitely skip that step. I need to get some more color right there. And I'm just spreading that color. Just like that. Okay, now I'm ready to move on to the next thing. So you want to be sure, I just squirt this on some paper towel until I get all the color out. And then I'm just going to go ahead and wipe off my block. And next I'm going to do the little flowers, which I'm using the polished pink. And I'm just doing the same thing. I'm coming in with this brush tip end and scribbling on my block. And then I'm going to come in with some water. And as I said, the more water you add, the more diluted the color will be. And I'm just going to try to gently stay on the leaves. These little flowers, for some reason, I had more trouble staying on the petals and not getting pink everywhere. Okay, there's my first one. And I'm going to do the same thing with this that I did with the pale papaya. I'm just going to go over the flowers. Just like this. And there's fewer of these, so it won't take quite as long. So I'm just going to speed up through this, and then I'll come back when I'm done to talk you through the next step. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to come in with that fine tip, and I'm going to just go over those middle seeds, or I don't even know what to call them, but those little raised dots in the middle of the flower. I'm just kind of scribbling over top of those, just like that. And then I'm just going to dip in the water and just kind of spread that around, just so I have a little bit of the darker color in the center of the flower. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to squirt some water, clean my brush, get rid of the pink, and we're on to the next color. Okay, now I'm going to come in with the soft succulent. And I know I've got a lot of leaves, so I'm going to put down a lot of color, and I'll probably still have to add more. I just know this is a lot of watercoloring with the leaves. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come in the water. I'm going to pick up the color, and I'm going to start on the leaves. Now, I went, the space in, like the veining of the leaf, I went ahead and colored that green. You can choose which way you want to do it. That's just the way I wanted to do it. Again, the more water you use, the more diluted it will be. And you can see the water moving. The more water you put on it, the more it's going to move around. So there's areas you might want to be careful with, because you don't want the green to be where you don't want it. But it does fill in those veins pretty well. Okay, so I'm just going to speed this up while I do all my leaves. Okay, so I'm done with my leaves. And in the process of that, I'm gonna go ahead and start cleaning my brush. But in the process of that, I noticed that there is a little bit of the pink flower that I missed. So I'm just going to clean off my green, and I'm going to go ahead and do that pink real quick before we move on to the purple. And I'll just need a little bit of color for that. Just a little bit of water, a little bit of color. And I'm just going to get this right here. Just a little portion of a flower. Now, as it starts to dry, you may see areas that you want to be darker. That's okay. All you got to do is add more color and water together and go right back over them. It's not like it's a one time and done and you have to be stuck with that. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with the fresh freesia. And this is also going to take some time, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to talk you through a little bit of it, and then I'm going to speed up the video so you don't have to watch me do the whole card. Okay, so I've just got my color down, and I'm just going to come in with the water. The more water you use, the less control over how far it moves. The less water you use, the more control, if that makes a difference to you. So I'm just going to come in, and I'm doing all the white areas. And you can see how the water pools. If you leave it pooled, you will have a darker concentration in that spot. If you don't like that, then make sure to smooth as you go. Otherwise, you'll have that dark concentration of color. And if you like it, then that's great. But if you don't, then just keep smoothing as you go. That's the key. Otherwise, you could have, you know, spots of darker. Let me show you on the finished card if I can. Like here, you can see that's a darker concentration than some of the rest of it. And that's what's going to happen if it starts to pool and you don't spread it. Okay, so just a tip there. And I'm just going through all the spots, the white spots, in between my flowers and my leaves, just to give it some color. So I'm going to continue to do this. I'll speed up the video, like I said, so you don't have to watch me do all this. If there's areas that are too light, you can always, as they dry, you can always go back over them. So I'm going to work on this, and I will come back when I'm finished. Okay, I've got all my background color down. Now, as this dries, like I said before, if you see some areas that you think, oh wow, I want to get more color there, or I got some purple on the peach, so I want to go back over the peach. You can certainly do that. So I'm just going to finish. I think I'm pretty happy with this. I even was touching up the other one right before I did this video. So even after it's dry and put together on the card, you can always go back. But keep in mind, this is watercolor. It's not supposed to be a perfect image because it's watercolor, right? Okay, so I'm going to move my board out of the way. And then we're ready to stamp on the bottom. So what I did is I'm going to use my Stamparatus because I want to make sure that I can get this image clear and the way I want it to be. So I'm going to put my piece that I just watercolored, and I'm going to take my thank you and I'm just going to line it up wherever I want it. This allows me to make sure I'm getting it straight, I'm getting it where I want it. I want it more towards the bottom than towards the line because I'm going to put ribbon there. And I think that looks good. So I just close the lid. And I am just going to use black Memento ink. I'm going to move some stuff around so that I can get this so you can see it. I'm just using the black Memento ink. I'm just going to ink this up. And again, you can stamp this twice. So if you don't get the dark image the way you want on the first pass, you can always come back over it. Okay. So then I'm just going to shut this and press on my stamp. And I think the O's a little light, so I'm just going to go over that part a little bit. And the A. And then I'm just going to shut this and just go back over it. And I like that image. So we're done with this. So I'm just going to pull this out, remove this. And we're ready to finish putting our card together. So I'm going to bring in my fresh freesia, and this is going to go on here like this. Just to have a little border. Okay. And I'm just going to use my liquid, my Tombow glue, because I have it right here. And it's good with this embossed image as well because it gets more down in the crevices. And I have a little glob of glue right there, so I'm going to clean some of that off. Okay, and I'm ready to put this on my piece of fresh freesia. I'm just going to try to line this up, giving myself a border. If you've seen me use the liquid glue before, I do like it for that reason, because you do have a little bit of forgiveness time if you don't get it on perfect where you want it. And I don't like the way this side's lifting up, so I'm just going to add a little more glue right at the edge and press that down. Now, for the next part, I am going to use some Stampin' Seal because that's the way I like to put on my ribbon. So I'm going to come in with my Stampin' Seal, and on the back, just right toward, knowing where this line is, I'm just going to put a little Stampin' Seal. Just like that. Because then I'm going to come in with my ribbon and I'm going to start it on one side, line it up where I want it, and I'm just going to press that around into that Stampin' Seal. I'm just going to trim the bottom, and I'm just going to get it straight where I want it, and press that over into that Stampin' Seal. And that gets my ribbon where I want it, and it holds it in place. So then I'm just going to come in with the Stampin' Seal. And I'm just going to go around my edges, go back over that ribbon. Okay. And I'm ready to put this on my card. I think that looks good right there. And then I'm just going to go over the fold. I'm going to use my bone folder to give it a good crease. And the card's almost done. Then we're down to making a bow. And I'm just going to try to do a real quick bow. Which is always hard for me on camera. So you can just pull the loops down to get them smaller and then tighten, and just keep doing that till you get the size bow that you want. And you can always manipulate the ribbon. You can always twist it and turn it, and okay, I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to come in with my scissors and I'm just going to trim. And I can always trim it again if I need to, once I get it on my card. And I'm just going to use a mini glue dot. So I'm just going to press this into the glue dot. Just like that. And then I'm going to kind of fluff my bow a little bit. Get it where I want it. And then I'm just going to press it down. And then I think I want to trim my tails just a little bit more. And I know that that's covering my sentiment a little bit, but I was okay with that. And there you have it. A stepped up card. I think the color steps it up a little bit, gives it some added interest that the plain white doesn't have. You can see this one's still a little wet, so that's a little darker. As it dries, it will soften a whole lot. So keep that in mind. You might want to wait till it dries before you go back over with it, you know, to add more color or to do something additional. Let it dry a little bit because it will soften. You can see this is real dark. It's going to really soften as it dries. So keep that in mind. You might want to let it dry completely. I hope you've enjoyed this card. I hope you'll look at your embossing folders in a different way and see which ones, that would be really cool to add some color to it with some watercolor. I hope you try this technique. I am an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up, so if you would like any of the products that I've used today, you can order them at my website, karensmith.stampinup.net. Join my Facebook group, Karen's Cards and More. Follow or like my page, Karen's Cards and More. My Facebook page. Check me out on Pinterest. I'm in all those forms of social media. And I look forward to crafting again with you soon.